It's common to try to use social media to try to become a famous media person, but the real reason why most people use social media is actually to try to build a business, and despite prevailing wisdom, they're two very different things. I think you'll learn a lot about that and perhaps get some insight into how you might better approach your own media, whether it's podcast, whether it's social media, whatever you use. When you listen to this hot seat call with Greg now, Greg has a podcast for surfers, and he's very purposefully using it to build his business, not to try to become a famous podcaster. And it's not that one approach is better than the other, right? They're just two very different approaches. And so this hot seat was part of my mentorship. Every 2 weeks, what we do is we get together and we go about 15 minutes with one person super deep. And so in this call, you will learn from my conversation with Greg, talking about his podcast, but more than anything else, talking about how important it is to understand the desired outcome of the actions you're taking online, and then how to build a plan to better align with that. So enjoy. Greg, you're on the hot seat, man. As always, if you could just real quick give us a bit of an overview of who you are, what you do, who you serve, and then what we're talking about today.
Great. Yeah. Greg Finch. I help surfers stay strong in the water till their last breath. So my niche is surfers. That's all I work with. And I'm in the Central Coast of California, and I've been in OTM since, I believe it's been October actually, but my path was a little weird. I had this I wanted to commit to it. I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. So I committed to it. But really, to be honest, I've done a single launch, but only now am I really fully able to commit. I had this really huge project on the personal side of my life, and I'm almost past it completely now. So
Cool.
now I can really commit much of what's needed to OTM. And so I've been doing things through that whole time and going through the curriculum, but now I'm really able to really take it to the level it needs to go to get everything out of it I can. So what I'd like to focus on, certainly I'll answer any questions about the business and needs itself. You know a little bit about it because you are actually a huge part of helping me launch my podcast. I did a Ask Me Anything with you probably back in October or
Yeah, it was
thereabouts.
a while ago. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I launched it right then, and I've been working really consistently on it. And actually it's gotten a lot of, my objective with the podcast is a little unique in that listenership, of course, is important. And I want that to grow to really start to get inbound traffic from it. But my main objective for it is to network amongst the professionals in the surf world itself, to
Hmm.
start to really raise that level of networking for an objective down the road of the longer game of being able to go to destinations and really coach their surfers that are high ticket, going to Indo. They're putting deposits down a years in advance of thousands and thousands of dollars,
Right.
so getting access to them and also networking with the professionals themselves to start to be a much more go-to in the coaching space for other people within the surf industry.
Yeah, I love what you're doing with the podcast because it's a great example of building a podcast to build a business versus building a podcast to try to be a famous podcaster.
Yeah, not
And
my
I,
objective at all.
yeah, and I mean, I don't think that there's anything wrong with either of them, but it's different games that you play. And if you end up being a famous podcaster, that's cool. But your your primary objective is very, very clear, which is awesome. I, your your market is such an interesting one to me because I know, even though I don't surf, I know the surf world really well because I have lived in so many surf towns around the world. Like I just got back from one that I was in for 4 months in Sayulita, and so I know surfers, and I know for the most part, surfers are broke as a joke. They show up in a surf town, in a town with a good surf break, and they'll do anything that they can do. They'll wait tables, they'll play music on the street, they'll do anything they can, work at coffee shops to be able to make enough money to be able to stay there while surf season's on. Um, but there are also, like, call them professional surfers who have a lot of money. who go to these high-end surf resorts. And so how are you reaching out to people now? Like how are you building out this network?
So I had this one experience and connection that was huge from the beginning that really helped me a lot. I went to somebody that I was close friends with, and professionally and personally, was doing acupuncture on the World Surf League. So she had this connection, and then she said, "Hey, Dr. Tim Brown, who's the co-medical director for the World Surf League." So in my world, that's it. That's our
Right,
professional surfing.
right,
Um, she had a relationship with him and say, hey, they're doing this in-person training. I think you'd really benefit from it. So that was in 2018. I did that initial one. And then 2019, they did an even larger one. And so I was able to meet kind of the heavy hitters in my world of
right.
everybody that was involved in this in-person event right before COVID hit. And my first 5 guests were all from that connection. So
That's
that really
cool.
helped me initially start that. Um, so that part was huge just to get it going, because some of the names that were on there, like I couldn't have reached out to them just on a
Mm.
cold contact, but they were really gracious and all came on, and that's really helped even spur it more, some validity when I reach out. So now,
100%. Yeah, once you get I learned that from hosting events. You really need one anchor guest.
yeah,
You need one anchor speaker, you need one anchor guest, and then you can leverage that to have everybody else show up and say, "Oh my God, I was doing this thing that other guy did." The surf world is there's got to be so many people behind the scenes. Like when I lived North Shore Oahu for a season, and like I wrote Vironomics at Turtle Bay Resort.
yeah.
I just basically sat in their lobby. And fun fact, they were filming the Hunger Games there as well. And Jennifer Lawrence, I guess, was there, which is really too bad because I didn't know who she was. But I could have married Jennifer Lawrence because I think if I knew who she was and I said hi, she probably would have wanted to marry me.
Well, that would have been clearly the path.
clearly, clearly that was before Allison. Uh, but but I met a lot of the people. Like I had Thanksgiving dinner outdoors at the VP of marketing of the Surf Association at her house. Um, and these are people who are movers and shakers in this massive industry. And yet it's almost like a small town feel.
It's very tight knit. They're very I've my experience in, as I just go farther into this too, in the podcast angle of things, is I'm amazed how many people are essentially giving me 90 minutes, 2
Mm-hmm.
hours of their time in a really busy world that they're in. And that's the part on the podcast. And personally, what I've really liked, lifetimes ago, I was in radio, very working towards a professional career in that, and I realized, okay, this is entertainment, this isn't really what I want to do. But I really loved the radio end of things, and being able to have these extended conversations with people feeds me in a way that I'm really surprised at. Like, it's
Right.
so opposite of the other work that we tend to have to do, computer work behind the scenes, all the things we're doing. It's this real connection that feeds me in a way that I love.
Yeah.
And
So you found it. So are you? So what's the struggle then? I mean, it sounds like the podcast's going well. Everybody
it
who shows up, you ask them if you could be introduced to two people who they
yeah.
think would be great on the podcast, and you start getting guests that way. Um, is it converting from there?
So
Like,
that's really where the struggle is. Of
mhm.
course, a lot of the questions I almost know the answers to, which is keep showing up, keep being consistent, keep having that, but leveraging that those parallels of the network on the professional side growing to
Yep.
really have those connections, and then the incoming community, DMs and other things, how to parallel those at the same time. So I'm getting more incoming and I can focus my attention on the content here. My objective would be have the podcast be very close to the most of the content that I'm creating and repurposing that, and then
Mm-hmm.
having the traffic come in. And I'm not really seeing that happen as much as I had hoped it would be. But I think it's still, maybe it just comes down to, again, consistent, and then make sure that I'm converting the things that I am coming in more. and how to make sure that I stay focused on this side. I
Right.
like this side and I really want to put more time into it, but I can't lose sight of the objective, which is I'm not looking to monetize the podcast really in any on the short term for sure. I want the monetization to be the coaching because
Right.
I love the coaching too. So if I can just get out of the hamster wheel of the content game a little bit more, but I want to make sure I don't lose sight of being effective on this side with the coaching.
Yeah, I think the podcast is definitely a longer term play. It's generally a brand play. That having been said, I mean, you can make very specific calls to action on the podcast. I also think what you can do, what a lot of people are starting to do a lot more now that have interview style podcasts. I can't do it on mine because I don't have an interview style podcast. But when you put out clips and stuff like that, you do collaboration posts
Yeah.
on other people's social medias back and forth. And then your social media, you just got to really brand to what you do and why you do it and how good you are at doing it on the coaching side. And you can almost time it as well if you know you have like a bigger name, or even like a name that's more influential, even if it's not big numbers, but you know it's going to be high quality numbers. You do a collaboration post, and then like the day before or whatever, you do a call to action, like you do a spear post on your Instagram, for example, just so that those incoming people are going to see that right away. It makes a big difference. And so, I mean, I don't think that there's much more that you can do. You can test that on your podcast, like appeals for people to DM you on social media. You can test, you can do some sort of a giveaway as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of the giveaway, of course, they enter their email or their phone number if you want to do a text message thing. And then you do a follow-up on there the same. And the follow-up in an email could be the exact same as the follow-up in like a DM conversation. Hey, here's your guide. This could be automated. Hey, here's your four stretches before you surf. The 4 stretches you must do before you surf. Like super simple like that, right? Here's your guide. I'm curious. You doing any strength training right now? Period. And then they get back to you, and then you start going from there. But I would test on the podcast episodes different appeals. Like that guide, I mean, you could put together a guide with 4 stretches before you surf.
Mm-hmm.
Probably if I shut up for a minute, you'd be done it.
Yeah.
Right?
And I have some of those really small, like performance checklist, surf ramp before, and they're just real clear and concise. Yeah. And just using those more effectively. I haven't done a lot of direct appeals on the podcast because I was really focusing on the quality of the interview and making sure, and that's probably where I can improve on, like, instead of having a commercial in the middle of the podcast, it's just my call to action.
Yes.
I'm placing it in there. Yeah.
100%. And you can, I don't know what software we use. We use Riverside now. But using the software, you can actually just record it once. So what I'll do on ours is I record a whole bunch of different ones, and then I just keep it in a Dropbox. And Amber's not a podcast editor, right? But this is how easy it is she'll just grab the clip and you literally just drag it in. And then when you export the thing, it exports it with that little ad spot. So I sit down once and I'll record like 3 or 4 of those little ad spots, and we'll just rotate them. And based off of the ones that get responses, we keep using. The ones that don't, we stop. So we got to move on, but I think it's great that you're enjoying this. I think it's awesome how you're using this, prioritizing the networking side of it. I don't know what will work in terms of converting people for your audience, but I think it's worth just trying a couple different things like we spoke about and just seeing what comes back. And then whatever works, just keep doing more of that. Mm-hmm. And all of it can lead to a consultative conversation. Like that's the thing. I mean, if I was doing a coaching business, like what you guys are doing, all that I would do is I would basically do like DM conversations based off of email opt-ins. We're doing that now actually for OTM. We never did it before, but we're doing that now for OTM, where on social media, on Instagram, particularly, but we did it on Twitter and stuff like that as well. People message us if they want a free guide, or if I think a masterclass video, people message us. And when they enter in to get the free guide, they have a phone number. They enter in their phone number. And Kyle, who some of you might have spoken with, sends him a text message. It's just like, hey, what's up? What are you trying to accomplish with the masterclass? I work with John. It's like, there's no reason why you can't do that. If they don't want to talk to you, they're an adult. They don't talk to you. We're not going to like badger them and like keep, it's like, hey, you got a guide. You're clearly trying to accomplish something. Let's chat. Cool. Thank you, Greg. I know you said you got to pop off because you're prepping for an interview. So that's cool. Appreciate you, man. I think it's cool what you're doing. Thank you so much for listening. Hope that you really enjoyed that episode with Greg. I really enjoyed it too. I think that it illuminated some really important distinctions between social media, between trying to build a following, or between trying to build a business, and how neither one is better than the other. But you kind of need to know what you are doing and why you're doing it, right? If you want to, if you're going to spend so much time doing this stuff. So anyway, like I said, that was a hot seat from my mentorship. This is for people who are already doing at least $1,000 online. If that's you and you're interested or even a little bit curious, please on Instagram, I'm at It's Coach Goodman. Send me a DM that just says mentor. We can have a conversation about it. In the meantime, I wanted to recommend another podcast episode for you to listen to if you're looking for something else to listen to right now. Episode 42 is what I recommend you check out. So if you scroll back in your whatever feed you're listening to this podcast in, you scroll back, number 42, it's called 8 Non-Obvious Coaching Truths. This idea of media to become a famous media person or media to build a business is somewhat counterintuitive. And I think you'll find some other insights that will probably seem obvious once you hear them, but they're somewhat counterintuitive. For example, passive income actually requires more work and has less chance of success than active income. And most people should ignore the fallacy of passive or even scaled income, and instead just become much better at what they do and learn how to generate real wealth, the money that it develops. And so that's just one example. But yeah, number 42, 8 Non-Obvious Coaching Truths. Hope that you enjoy that episode. It's one of my favorites, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.